Welcome to the Out of Control show with Rusty J and Kent C. Straight. It's about to get dangerously dangerous.
What's out of control?
Who's out of control?
You know what's out of control these days, folks? The WHO Pandemic Treaty.
You got that right, Kent. And
nobody's talking about it.
Nobody's talking about it. Nobody's making any mention of it. And this is going to be signed into power here at the end of May. May 24th.
I'm not 100% sure if it's into power, but it's definitely in the negotiation and draft phase.
Right.
So it doesn't mean it's official yet, but the inputting of ideas and changes should be.
Right.
Right? So correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it's official just yet. But it's greasy and it's in the works.
It sure is. And it just, it's concerning. It's concerning in a lot of different ways. And, I think as Canadians, we really need to be aware of why this is happening and who's making it happen and why isn't anybody talking about it? Why isn't there any mention of it? And, I believe our healthcare system is a provincial jurisdiction, right, Ken?
Well, just to clarify with everybody here, when we say WHO, we mean the World Health Organization that has right now, 194 country members. So what they're basically doing is because of COVID and the pandemic, they created this treaty where they give power and some control over to the World Health Organization. And that all countries are to act together and I guess share whatever information, material, help, whatever it may be. But I don't know. There's some scary parts to it there. Even our federal conservative MP, Leslyn Lewis, has been talking about it. She had an article just the beginning of this year. But yes, you are correct that the next part of it being signed is in May of 2024, which is around the corner.
Right. And, well...
What's the scary part, right?
Well, what is the scary part? There's a lot of scary parts. And I think just looking back on how our government handled the COVID pandemic should be a big enough example of how you can give incompetent people ultimate power and how bad they can screw things up and how twisted things can get. That's a show on its own, Kent. But as for, this pandemic treaty, we are at risk at giving people and a non-government organization some control or total control. As we've seen how things changed so fast during the COVID crisis and how politicians turned on the people, turned on what they said, no, we're not going to enforce mandatory vaccination and then totally flip-flop.
And now masks.
Right, and masks and social distancing was probably the best measure you could do and like keeping yourself away from people, but other than distance, there isn't really much more you can do to fight these kind of outbreaks. So
they could have done what they should have done at the beginning, and that was not call Canadian racists. And if you do know that there's a central hub, like people are going to get on airplanes, they're going to spread shit, of course, faster than we would have when everyone was moving on ships. And then even faster when everyone before that was walking. So if you have a hot spot like Wuhan or one of these big cities in China that was a big hub and then they traced it back to a lot of travelers with COVID left out of that place, well then you could, for like a short time, if you really are worried about people dying, you could stop flights from there for a bit. You just could. It would suck. It would harm business, but in comparison to harming all business with lockdowns and restrictions across the whole country, harming Canadian families and that, at the very beginning, they could have just fucking locked everything down.
Well,
not Canadians' lives. Not Canadians' lives.
Right. Yeah,
but
exactly.
Locking down the ability or slowing down the ability
Right.
of a virus coming to Canada.
Wasn't it at one time, I believe, the only planes that were coming from China? Like, they did not...
They
China
probably
did
doubled
not-
the flights from China. They're like, ooh.
Imagine that, you know?
The consultants start licking their lips, and all the lobbyists and the people and the fucking medical community and all the fuckers that made money off of the suffering of Canadians and the taking of our rights and the segregation and the organized public hatred. If you can't tell, I'm still a little pissed off about it.
Well, Ken, I don't blame you.
It's not supposed to happen in Canada.
Why did all of a sudden did we forget what happened, what was done to us, the vaxism, and these choices and these things that we're seeing here that are basically out of control? And basically, we want to give a non-government organization, and I can't stress that enough, a unelected body control, any kind of control. Now I can see recommendation and being able to help out and
like organize medical services, perhaps,
Right,
get the
and
people to where they need
absolutely,
to be,
and try to do
like
things,
logistics,
yeah, in a common sense,
not
kind of way.
control.
Not control, not lock you down and push you around.
Well, look at the failures of our systems and the advantages taken by our institutions and politicians when they saw the opportunity. They basically allowed it to happen, let's be honest. They allowed shit to spread. They used the fear to control people. And then they hammered down on people's rights and everything else that everyone wants to ignore these days.
Absolutely. So now we're going to let some foreign body do that to us.
And these people are just as corruptible.
Right.
They're just as greasy in some spots as others. You know, they're not making deals because of fancy dinners. And off of Leslyn Lewis's own webpage, the WHO has stated that the treaty could ensure better preparedness and equitable response for future pandemics, and to advance the principles of equity, solidarity, and health for all. And it could take lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic and use them to build back better. Equity is one of the key principles being discussed as part of the work on the new accord. So we have already understood, we've given a few examples today of how the COVID-19 response was a shit show, and the governments didn't know what to do, and they overreacted, and it pissed everybody off, and they're going to take, they've now stated that they're going to take lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic and use them to build back better. Now,
Oh, we're building back better. We're still building back better. But what have we built? We built fuck all, Ken.
Yeah,
That's
we
what I
built a
see.
shit ton of debt, and we built bigger lines at the food banks, and we built doubling our mortgages, and we built pissed off young people who can never buy a home, and we built off, there's cheaper fucking groceries in Russia and Mexico than there is in fucking Canada. Like, and then people are complaining about rent, but they, yes, they're... I know there's a 30 or 25, 30% of like foreign investors who buy a bunch of fucking properties up and then rent them out, which brings up the value and prices of all the other ones. But if you are a landlord, and then you fucking, your mortgage is renewed and doubled, are you gonna increase the rent on your rental property or your second property? Or are you going to eat that cost of your mortgage being doubled? Unfortunately, it's a kick in the balls, but in order to have houses to rent to people, there needs to be landlords, and some of them are good.
Hey, don't worry, Ken, we're going to build 4 million of them here.
Jesus, so...
2027, bro. 4 million, boom.
Yeah. We are bringing in... Right now, the Liberals, they brought in over 1 million people. I don't know what the official number is, but it's over 1 million. You could split hairs about what it is over that. But we build about 200,000 homes a year, 220,000 in a good year, 180,000 in bad economic times, So we're around that 200,000 homes a year. They're bringing in 1 million people a year. It doesn't mean we don't need immigration. It doesn't mean that we don't like or want immigrants. Of course we do. Ones that add value and come here in a peaceful manner, that want to have a good life and raise their family. Sure. But you got to do it intelligently. You can't just bring in 5 times the amount of people that we're building homes for.
How about
and then expect everything to be cool.
Right.
That's some horseshit liberal math.
I'm with you.
Right?
It's out of control, Ken. It's out of control. We're pissed off here. That's why we're doing the show, folks.
Rusty.
We need to talk about it. We need to come up with solutions. And unfortunately, a lot of those solutions involve you, me, and the next guy to get off of our asses, shut off YouTube, get our voice heard, because they're not listening this way. And we're going down a real dark and dirty path. And that's why we're concerned with this pandemic treaty, folks, is that this treaty it just gives a lot of shady people control, or, like I say, maybe it's not total control, but how do we know it doesn't go from limited control to total control, depending on the severity of the outbreak? Or
now, he also there's only been one federal MP that I'm aware of, Leslie Lewis, who has talked about the pandemic treaty, the
That's
conservative
right.
federal MP. And even though we like Pierre and the Conservatives, they ain't talking about this.
Nobody's mentioning, and that's why we're bringing it up, because nobody's talking.
Is this as big of a news headline as tornadoes or something else? The thing I think is crazy is if you are Canadian and you protest in Canada simply against the government forcing drugs into you or your family under the threats of unemployment, segregation, organized public hatred, all the shit that the unvaccinated people dealt with, and at the end of it all, the Emergencies Act being unconstitutional or considered unjustified, and the police beatings, the pepper sprays, the horse trampling, the rifle butting, the arrests, all the shit that Canadians took just to stand up to not have drugs forced into you. Now we're seeing videos in Canada, out of Ottawa, of them cheering for October 7th and the attack that happened in Israel. And I tried to stay because I know this is like a 2,000-year-old conflict. They might have had different names back then. I know Islam's
gotta stop living in the past, Ken.
Right? But
that's what it boils down to.
But there's no, what I said that for was just to compare it to right now the very aggressive and more violent protests in Canada and America regarding Israel and the Palestinians. And I tried to stay out of it, as neutral as I could, because I understand it's like thousands of year old conflict, whether it was tribe against tribe or region against region. These people have been battling for thousands of years, and there's no amount of protest or screaming or crying in Canada is going to change that. It's different when we protest in Canada for Canada against the Canadian government, like vaccine mandates. That's different. But to have violent and hate crimes and chanting and creating actual fear and violence against people in Canada and celebrating a terrorist group.
Yeah.
It's one thing to feel bad for the Palestinians. It's another thing to be cheering for the actual terrorist attack where 800 or 1,000 people were brutally
just another classic example of one person's freedom fighter is another's terrorist.
Yes.
So, and it just seems like it's an ongoing conflict here on this planet, really. And it would sure be nice if we could overcome this and actually let bygones be bygones one day, because we're going to have to one day. Or do we just going to keep on going until we burn this planet to the ground? Because like that's all we know is what we're all about: war. Like nobody's talking about peace. I'd like to think we are going to talk a lot about peace and solutions and coming up with ways to get people together and connected and be able to make a difference, a peaceful difference in a common sense way, right? And hopefully make some change on this planet, because at the rate we're going in a very, very dark path. And this pandemic treaty could be
another avenue
that we should be really looking at some of the things that governments are doing in the aid of military, research or what have you.
Pandemic treaties,
right? And weather modifications that will, and that's the other thing with this pandemic treaty, that any kind of crisis gives these people power
and control.
So
we, are not going to pretend to be experts on this. And there is another signing or meeting sometime in May of this year, 2024. So we will look into this again and bring some more detailed information for you folks.
Absolutely.
Look into it yourself.
Absolutely.
If you're interested in it. I mean, it's something to be concerned about. We're not saying the house is on fire and to run around screaming, but this is something you want to pay attention to, and maybe write your MP or various MPs an email, or nicely, of course, but just reminding them that this is happening and it's something to pay attention to, because it could be, from what we've seen in the past, responses to recent pandemics, it could be not good.
Not good at all. And it could get out of control really fast, Ken. And these people showed how fast things can get out of control when you give incompetent people ultimate power.
And they hide inside and say they have COVID.
Yeah.
Oh,
right.
well. But he has nice hair.
Well, he did.
Well, thanks, folks. Take a look into it. Like, subscribe, share. We thank you for chatting with us. Take care and have a great night.
Have a great night. Thanks, folks.
Peace.
Bye.